The Mindset Advantage, a podcast by Arcadia Consulting, architects of change.
Having a peak performance mindset and mental toughness is about utilising the pressure of change to perform even better than had there been no pressure. Today, Steve Ellis is joined by Dr Cory Middleton, who has explored the characteristics of these peak performers to understand what sets them apart and how they develop their mental fortitude alongside their technical expertise, bringing mind and skill together to perform at their best and thrive under pressure when it matters the most.
Hi everybody, my name is Steve Ellis. I'm the regional head of EMEA here at Arcadia, and I am thrilled to be joined by Dr Cory Middleton. Cory, why don't you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on the show. We're really grateful to be talking about thriving at the moment. What a great time to be bringing this topic to help many. So, look, my background. I used to work in professional sport. So I worked with athletes, Olympians, looking at the mental toughness that it takes to succeed under lots of adversity, all through preparation, right through to the actual Olympic Games. So my specialty area is mental toughness, and I've been working in the corporate space for many years now, helping people sort of solve issues around leading, building high-performing cultures, and selling in really challenging markets.
Yeah, and hugely relevant at the moment, as you mentioned, Cory. So I know about your research, but the listeners won't know about your research. And I certainly found it groundbreaking, but also super useful to share with clients and individuals to help them to thrive under pressure. Tell us a little bit more about your research.
Absolutely. Yeah, look, I'm based here in Australia, and as part of the Olympic program here, we've got a real centre of excellence. And so what it was like was I basically completed a PhD program where we wanted to find out from people who'd been to the top, achieve even better if they'd been through significant adversity, to really understand the psychology of creating high performance. So we wanted to understand, how do you become mentally tough? Are you just born that way? Can you develop it? If so, how do you develop it? And what are the key parts of our mindset or our mental skills or our psychological makeup that I need to start paying attention to bring the best out of myself? So the PhD basically looked at uncovering what is mental toughness and understanding how we can actually go about structurally kind of building it.
We've been talking a lot on the podcast series about adversity, change, challenge, and the difficulties of that. And you mentioned that in your research, you looked to answer the question, what is mental toughness? What is thriving under pressure? How is that different from some of the other topics that we've talked about on the podcast, such as, resilience, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. A very common question I get asked about the difference between resilience and mental toughness. So, and I would say they're on a very similar spectrum. They both have to deal with dealing with different levels of adversity. And resilience, by its definition, is the ability to resile, which is to bounce back. So, for example, I experience a setback, I experience pressure, knocks me off, but it allows me to bounce back and hold steady, hold consistent, if you like. So that is definitely the quality of resilience, and that is at a base level. That is our basic psychological strength, is the ability to be consistent and to be resilient, if you like. Sitting a little bit further on the same spectrum as a further dimension of mental strength, which is not just the ability to be consistent, but it's the ability to step up. And I love the title of the session that you put here, thriving under pressure. It's not just about being consistent under pressure. It's actually about stepping up and delivering extraordinary when it really counts.
Stepping up extraordinary. And I like that phrase, when it counts, particularly. And we've been talking about dealing with change and stepping up when it counts as an individual, but also stepping up when it counts as a leader and leading people through change in order, as we know, to deliver results. In sport, that might be gold medals. In business, that might be economic performance, revenue, profit, return on assets, whatever that might be, or indeed team metrics like staff loyalty, staff engagement, staff commitment, staff morale. So all about delivering results whilst going through change. Tell us a little bit more about what your research found as a differentiator, if you like. What were those identifiers of those people that were able to thrive under pressure, under challenge, and do exactly what you described, step up?
Yeah, look, the easiest way to describe it, like simplest terms, is if I would describe a centerpiece, like a core finding, and then 4 sort of key peripheral findings. So the center finding is about where a person gets their strengths, where a person finds that energy to be tough. So we found that toughness is a very internally referenced thing. It's not about someone who's relying on external sources to find the drive, to find the will, to find the strength to kind of get through. These people have actually developed an internal strength, an internal reference point that really that's where their energy stems from. That's where they keep going back to push through when everyone else is falling off. It's that internal reference point instead of external validation. So that's the central piece. And then what's surrounding that is what I call sort of 4 key drivers of toughness. So the one is where a person drives their motivation from. So you'll find that they have a very inspiring kind of belief set around things like, in a work team, particularly in the current market, having worthwhile goals that you value, and even more than value, like feel purposeful and you feel like there's a belonging to that goal. There's an emotional kind of connection to the goal that you're trying to pursue. So there's a piece around that, and as well in the motivation place is an element I call mastery, which is around sort of the being genuinely interested and having huge care for mastering your craft and letting the results take care of themselves. So all this sort of fits in what I call the motivation sort of pillar. The second sort of area that sits around the centerpiece is around our beliefs. You find that these mentally tough people have developed over time a very powerful belief set. One of the ones in that set I think that's really important at the moment is around identity. We're kind of going through the washer machine at the moment, where being challenged or constrained, and there's a lot of limitations. And given this has gone on for some period of time, one of the most common things I'm finding around beliefs at the moment is people are becoming very restless around growth. We've had to sort of bide our time and just hang in there. But there's a real drive for more powerful beliefs, and says, I need to keep growing. I've sort of been holding the line enough. So it's a belief. Look, the third piece, the third pillar around our central piece of mental toughness is around the genuine resilience of coping skills. So some real sort of mental skills, if you like, that allow me to develop what I call what is called in psychology a positive sentiment override. So essentially you get in your coping skills, you get to a point where you're either more positive or more negative, if you like. And so through the skills training, you can actually develop to a point where even something that is slightly negative, you have a positive belief about that or a positive mindset around that, which is called positive sentiment override. Where if you get slightly more negative than positive, you get what's called negative sentiment override, which is even something that can be slightly positive, you actually take as a negative. So it's about just getting the balance right in that place. And look, the fourth and final area is around managing our attention. So it's the psychology of attention, the power of attention. There's some great work being promoted around the globe at the moment around mindfulness, not just mindfulness for stress management, but mindfulness performance. People are really cluing into the performance benefits of actually, getting into that pure moment of mindfulness and having great control over that, or if you like agility with our attention, being able to focus on different priorities and be able to switch off and block to the next one and then move back as needed. So be able to, the power to almost like direct your attention a little bit more. So.
No, that was great. I was chuckling halfway through, particularly around the positive sentiment override and this idea that I think everybody listening to this podcast will have examples of this where, it's glass half full, glass half empty. But even when you're presented with information or data that is positive, that there are those what we call mood hoovers, energy vampires, people that can suck the energy out of something good. So even though the data says it's good, they can still have a negative sentiment override. So now that was just making me chuckle. Not that anybody came to mind as you were referencing it, but thanks for that. So I hear 5 things. So I hear this internal reference point, that core element of where they get their energy from, that internal perspective. Can that be? Imagine there's a leader listening to this podcast, and they say, yes, absolutely. As I look across my team, there are those people that are internally referenced. They get their energy from themselves. And then there's those people that need the arm around the shoulder, externally referenced, and need the outside world to love them and like them and for it to go well. Can that, and if I heard you correctly, those people that had that strong internal reference tended to thrive under pressure better. Can that be trained? What if I've got a team member that hasn't got that? What do I do?
Can it be learned? Absolutely. In fact, it's actually, I believe it's within all of our destiny to actually learn this at one point in our life. So if you think we're actually all born almost more externally referenced, because if you imagine children growing up, we look to external references. We look to potentially parents, our carers, our teachers, our coaches, our mentors in life as we're growing up as young children. We look for external guidance in terms of, go this way, go that way, reward, recognition, and et cetera. And that's very much the childlike psychology. However, what you see is, and we found that as the athletes were getting to the age of about 15, 16, there was this natural transition in psychology that was actually occurring, and we're all destined to have that. It's a transition from external reference to internal reference, where it's like the adult psychology starts to appear. The adult psychology is just because I hear it doesn't mean I have to believe it. As an adult, I can start to make up my own mind around what's important or what I'm going to value. I can choose to buy into it, or I can choose not to buy into it. I can choose to be driven by that or focus on that, or I could choose not to focus on that because I'm an adult and I have choice. So that is actually designed naturally to actually occur in sort of our mid-teenage years as we sort of transition into adulthood. Now, depending on individual circumstances, often, as a 15 or 16-year-old, you're potentially still living at home, still living under sort of house rules. You might go on to some university or post-schooling, and you get taught to, as long as you do what the teacher says, as long as you get the grades, you'll be okay. And you get into the job, and as long as you hit the KPIs, you're going to be okay. So some people miss the boat, and they'll just keep trying to please. But what happens is it does catch up with you at some point in your life. Eventually, you sort of cotton on that I'm never really going to be genuinely happy or fulfilled trying to please others. At the end of the day, there's an internal reference that you almost hold yourself honest. You sort of hold score with honestly with your own self, and it's almost that's when the penny drops. So I believe we're all destined to actually make that transition. It's just for some people, it doesn't happen till later in life.
Is it possible that certain circumstances actually either enable or facilitate me to regress back to a sort of childlike state? I mean, as you were talking, I was hearing in my own mind words like dependent. So a child is very dependent on external references, dependent on family, dependent on the world, providing. And then that independence, that self-motivated, that self-destiny driven kind of mindset. So, and then what I notice under change sometimes, particularly, more recent changes, then you can sort of fall back into the trap of possibly being a victim, possibly blaming the world, possibly saying my destiny is now down to everybody else around me, my self-esteem is down to everybody else around me, the world around me, and change can sort of tip us back into that place. Are there, I guess, for leaders, are there strategies that they can use to help people at the most appropriate time in the change curve or change response to sort of hold on to that independence, hold on to that sense of self, rather than fall back into a sort of transactional analysis, childlike approach to things.
Yeah, look, absolutely. Like, so if you're looking at, falling into a state of dependency versus being truly independent, the key thing that you need to transcend from one of those to the other is it's actually a sense of personal responsibility. At the end of the day, you have to take 100% ownership of what you're getting. Now, not what's happening to you, but what results you're pushing through your own effort. So what leaders can do is, regardless of circumstances that are outside our control, it's kind of like helping us focus on the controllables and taking 100% ownership of the controllables. And when we're taking 100% ownership, that's when independence happens.
Yeah. Thanks for that. So as I mentioned, 5 things I heard. So that internal reference things can be learned. It happens naturally. We can sometimes fall back, but it can be learned, and it's all about 100% ownership. Then you talked about 4 other things: motivation, particularly interested in that purposeful, meaningful goals piece and the mastery piece. Then you talked about beliefs and these powerful can-do, I can kind of beliefs. Then those the positive sentiment override, the coping skills, the mental skills to perceive situations, I guess, in a more positive override way that drives action and drives results, I guess. And then the 4th element, that attentiveness. And again, I heard underpinning that attentiveness was a language of to what extent can you control that attentiveness? So mindfulness was one thing, but are you in control of that? Can you turn it on, particularly, as you mentioned, when you need it the most? I guess those people that are good at those 5 things, they outperform the others. Is that right? Do they generate better results? Do they ultimately, from your research, they thrive under the pressure of external stuff because they've got those 5 things? Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly what we found. So the research involved a qualitative phase, which was actually interviewing the people that specialists felt they had this factor, and also comparing them to people who were more susceptible and perceived to not have this quality mental toughness. And so, yeah, these were the pillars of, what's creating that kind of difference in the qualitative. But then we backed that up. So we did actually, there's a questionnaire that we do, and we assess people on this. And that was actually able to successfully differentiate between elite and non-elite in terms of the results we're actually getting.
Super. So we're able to identify the characteristics of these people that can thrive under pressure, which is great. We can evidence via the research, both qualitatively and quantitatively, that they outperform everybody else, as distinguishing between elite athletes and non-elite athletes. And I'm assuming, by the way, given you mentioned at the top of the call that you're now working in corporates, that also shows up in a corporate environment. It's not just a sporting environment. I'm beginning to notice it increasingly in a social environment. And what I mean by that is people driving performance on a climate change or a sustainability agenda, not just the sort of typical economic business agenda or the sporting agenda. I can actually see people delivering better results because of their ability to thrive under pressure in a societal agenda. So is it showing up in different areas of performance?
It absolutely is. Like so definitely across businesses and in different functions. So we see whether you're a technical specialist or part of a broader team, whether you're a leader or an individual contributor, you can definitely assess and look at these characteristics. And it is leading to different sort of levels of the experience of their work and the results of their work as well.
So I guess where the rubber hits the road in this is when we find out that it's developable, that actually, yes, we can observe it as a researcher. We can see how it plays out. And I've got a team. Can I develop my team? And if so, and probably importantly, how do I do that? Because that seems to me like the golden ticket that says, if I can develop my team to not be average, but be peak performers under the never-ending challenge of change, they can thrive in that environment. Well, that seems to be the golden ticket. So give me the golden answer. If you were developing a team of corporates or whoever, How would you go about doing that in order to deliver this golden ticket?
Yeah, look, coming back to the central piece of mental toughness, which is around that self-ownership, that internal source of energy, where you get your energy from is internal. So with that in mind, mental toughness is not something that you can tell me to do. So as a leader, you can't tell them to be tough and they're going to be tough. They have to get the energy from within. So the key part of coaching for mental toughness is not to tell them the skills or just simply show them the skills, but it's what we call an interaction cycle where, so if I was looking at the topics of motivation, I talked about, valuing the task, feeling like I belong on this mission that my team is going towards. I can't just tell them it's a valuable mission. I have to interact with them in such a way where they feel it's a valuable mission. They feel connected. They develop for themselves their own beliefs that this is my purpose. I've been born to actually take this business from here to there. So it's the way leaders interact. And if I go across to beliefs, we're talking about developing some can-do identity. So identity that I'm growing, I'm going to succeed, I'm going to develop through this whole experience. It's not enough just to tell them they're going to grow. We need to have an interaction in our coaching, our feedback mechanism, how we set goals, review goals, promote growth, an interaction experience from leader to team, from team member, where they feel identity is growing, etc. So it's about leaders really tapping into this interaction to grow the outside four pillars of toughness.
I think we miss that out as leaders, that interaction. And what I mean by that is that feedback loop that says we are progressing. Look at how much not only business results are we creating, but also what team sentiment results or team connection results or team trust results that we're creating, and subsequently what team belief that we're creating, which, back to your point, what team identity we're creating. And I think leaders miss a trick with regards to that feedback loop of constantly reminding the team of the journey they've been on, not just the destination they've got to, and therefore how much they've grown into their performance, because it's that will take them on to their next performance and the performance after that. I guess the cliche is the journey, not the destination kind of stuff that we lose sight of, because that's that was the human part, not just the outcome part.
Yes, yeah. Look, you mentioned the importance of feedback in that. Absolutely, this is a very central part, but it's not one directional. So I'm not telling you the feedback and therefore you should change, because that's not the right interaction cycle we're looking for. We want to have an interaction with feedback where they're actually surrounded in constant feedback. We call it, actually, in the sporting world, it's, feedback-rich environment, where you're getting feedback all day, every day. It's expectation. In fact, you're hungry and curious and fascinated to find any data points that might give you some kind of clues about how to be more successful. That when you interact with feedback on a constant basis, you cannot help but grow.
Yeah, you sort of see the sports people, don't you? That when you watch them training, they sort of adapt or do a tiny little change to their stance or their posture or something. They execute a performance and they sort of run straight back to the person with the clock or the computer and say, "What happened? What happened? What happened?" You see it in athletics. You see it in motor racing. You see this absolute insatiable desire to get some information and some feedback, which is constantly driving that performance. And the fact that they're almost sprinting back to the laptop to see that data tells you that they're really passionate about it. They have a real desire to surround themselves by that information. I really like it. You've measured it. Can we measure it? Can we measure somebody's ability to thrive under pressure? Can we sort of get a line in the sand and sort of say, that's currently where my team are at, or that's currently where an individual is at with regards to their mental toughness or their ability to thrive? Can we measure it?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, as a flow on from the PhD project and moving across into business, I did develop an assessment for this where a person can basically take the mental toughness test, or it's not an exam. It's a development tool where you can basically understand your strengths and weaknesses across the deeper level factors that we found that support those 4 dimensions. So with that, you can actually get a full comprehensive development report that shows things like your strengths and weaknesses. It shows a couple of signature patterns to watch out for, as well as some very specific development tasks, which give you a couple of immediate clues into where you can go to actually start to get immediate benefit, immediate strength. Your mental strength is like a muscle. You got to sort of train it regularly. So any feedback, any data you can get, and certainly the assessment provides some rich data for you to start thinking about where you can get stronger.
Thanks for that. So it's a developmental tool. I like the way you distinguish that from a test or an exam or an assessment. Developmental tool. And you get some development ideas. Something you mentioned just in the middle there, I don't want to lose sight of it, which was some signature patterns. What did you mean by that, Cory?
Yeah, look, as well as finding out about mental toughness, we also discovered there was a couple of when we were building the instrument in particular, there was a couple of actually really interesting patterns or mental traps that people kind of fall into. So the tool actually picks this up. So there's sort of 3 typical ones that we look at. So the first is actually what we call like a rejection sensitive pattern. So through the way the data comes through, you can actually tell if you're an individual contributor or a leader potentially is actually more or less susceptible to feelings of rejection. So whether that's in a sales interaction or being rejected by a team, you can actually start to understand the psychology of rejection in the person. Another one is the psychology of perfectionism. And so what we look at there is like when people are being, a little too overcritical and constantly marking themselves down, almost making it hard to allow themselves to feel what it feels like to flourish, truly flourish. So you can definitely see in the way people score themselves and rate themselves that you can see some perfectionist tendencies there that can sort of be a little bit debilitating. And the last one is what we call it a pressure cooker mindset. But what we're kind of really looking at there is you can also detect when it's kind of like a results or nothing sort of mindset. They ride the result, if you like. So if it's dollars, it's hitting the KPIs. If they're winning in the dollars, then they're winning emotionally. If they're not, then their confidence can go missing. The drive and passion can be questionable. And you don't see that sort of toughness step up where, so you can actually see the more tough, as you develop more toughness, we move from result sensitivity, we move to this high internally referenced sense of performance, where we deliver those great results, but without the pressure of doing so.
Yeah, if you're not careful, of course, the result itself is actually the external validation. It's the external, and that's a trap, right? Because you're going to suddenly put yourself under huge amounts of pressure, and I guess it affects your identity. What am I? Who am I? Without that external result. So, that's a little bit scary. So can I actually still have that internal strength and resourcefulness without the dependence on the external validation of the result, which is a sort of chicken and egg in the sense that it's more likely to deliver the result, ironically. So appreciate that very much. You've obviously been working with corporates and sports people, and you've been developing your methodology based on your research. I think I know the answer to this, but let's put it out there. I assume it's making a difference. If so, what kind of differences is it making to leaders, to individuals in teams as it relates to their, and I ideally fell into the trap, their performance, but as it relates to their ability to thrive under pressure and then subsequently their ability to deliver results?
Absolutely. Look, at a higher level, and there's some importance around creating breakthrough financial results and outcomes. And absolutely, when you see a team take on this methodology, that's what you can expect. You can expect sort of breakthrough, standing out from industry peers in terms of levels of performance. That's at a higher level, and obviously that's the summary. But digging down into that, why you experience that is because starting at an individual contributor level, you start to have individuals who outperform belief systems. They start to perform better than even they thought. And they start having interactions with leaders who are also leading better than they thought they could. And then that interaction cycle kicks in. And so you can see how this builds up and cascades into records. So often when I'm working with teams, that's often what you can expect. When you build it up that way, when you get this great power coming from the leadership and this great power coming from the individuals, you can't help but get breakthrough.
Wow. Some of the joy that I have when I'm coaching teams and individuals is exactly what you've just described in terms of outperforming their belief system and getting on a roll, if you like, getting in the zone. But I also get that lovely corridor conversation, that after hours conversation that sort of says, you do realize, Steve, this shows up outside of work just as much. Outside of work, I am loving it. I am having a ball. I've really changed my relationships. Do you see that also in your work? Do you see that because I guess it's a fundamental part of who they are. You can't just switch that off at 6 p.m., 7 p.m. when you walk into the house, all right? So do you see that also?
Absolutely. Look, it was actually a really interesting part of the research. I mean, part of the research was, if I go back to the initial research question, was to go and sit with someone who had won world championships, gold medals, maybe multiple times. So I expected to sit with them and hear them talk about, oh, it was so tough. Did you see what they write about me in the press? It was just terrible. But I just lined up and had wobbly legs and somehow I just got through, right? This is how I did it. This is how I pulled it all together. I did not hear that once. When I found Mentally Tough, it was actually the completely opposite story. They were in such a headspace that it felt joyous. They were just so in the moment with it. There was there wasn't the questions of their belief. There wasn't a crisis of confidence. There wasn't a reduced sense of will or purpose. You get into this, the whole positive psychology space talks about things like flourishing and thriving, but that's exactly how you're feeling in that moment. I've talked about positive sentiment override. So you get into such a state where it's stress is there, but it feels different. Your relationship with stress is different, and so you don't potentially carry it home with you as much as you do when you're probably more in a negative sentiment override kind of state.
Brilliant. Cory, I think we're almost out of time. At this point, I want to say thank you very much. It's been fabulous listening to your research, your insights. I repeat those five zones around, or 5 domains, if you like, that inner reference, that motivation, that belief, that coping skill or positive sentiment override, and that ability to turn on attentiveness and focus and concentration as being really strong drivers of somebody's ability to thrive under pressure. Thank you very much for all of your contribution to the research and to the podcast. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks for a very enjoyable chat. Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to The Mindset Advantage. Follow Arcadia Consulting on social media platforms to stay updated.